All right, and we're back with author Michael C. Anderson.
So, Mike, how do you
Yep.
heal the divide? Right, we went to break. We are so polarized. If there's a middle, they left the game board. Maybe there's still a middle, but they left the game board. How do you put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Very good question. My tribalism book was published in 2019, and the last chapter offers three ways to get rid of tribalism. I haven't changed my mind since then. Let's run through those. The first and most obvious one is if any single event happened that would unite the country, we wouldn't be tribal. Let's say like a 9/11. And I don't wish a 9/11 on our country. I don't wish anything like that trauma, but that certainly would fix tribalism because it would redirect everybody's focus on what the country needs instead of what individual groups need. When COVID came, I thought that was going to be the answer because here you have a pandemic affecting all Americans, and we would unite and work together to solve the pandemic, and it immediately became polarized. So it failed, unfortunately. My other two suggestions are, one is that it'll end because everybody will be too exhausted to continue. Because at some point, it's
Exhaustion.
it's really ridiculous when you think about this arguing over ideology, because it stands in the way of government functioning. I mean, by having this internal argument between left and right that offsets whatever the government's going to do in a positive fashion, not to mention the fact that Americans are not united behind any objectives that can influence government. So we just sit here and spin. So Americans are wasting their time arguing about ideology when ideology shouldn't matter. Politics should be practical. We should be able to have a consensus about what's important and move forward.
But how do you do that when there's no dialogue? Look, one of my arguments here, I understand your point, and you make a really good point. But part of the problem to me is, to be very candid, is that Republicans are only talking to Republicans. Democrats are only talking to Democrats, right? Everybody's in this echo chamber. And while I agree with you, I think social media has really sort of exacerbated on steroids, or exacerbated exponentially, the divide in this country, right? Or the tribalism, as you call it. I think it started with 24/7 news, right? Where when everything's important, nothing's important. And we have, in an attempt to sanitize the political process, which is inherently not a sanitized, not something that should or could be sanitized, in my opinion, you prevented, I mean, look, Ted Kennedy, the Prince of Darkness to Republicans, and Strom Thurmond, the arch conservative from, I think it was North Carolina, disagreed on many things, but they worked together where there was commonality. And frankly, they were friends. Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan. There's plenty of examples in history, but where's the middle now? Where are they? And how do you breach that divide? Because in theory, I agree with you, but Democrats are only talking to Democrats. Right. Republicans are only talking to Republicans.
This is a great setup for my next answer. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
The third solution potentially is grassroots organization that start a dialogue between the two parties and move forward that way and spread. One of those organizations you may or may not heard of is called Braver Angels. I'm a member of Braver Angels. It's about 30 to 40,000 people who have
don't know it.
Local chapters. Braverangels.org is the website. There are local chapters in almost every American city, and it's very inexpensive to participate. And each chapter has monthly meetings where people indicate whether they're red or blue. So you have a room full of reds and blues, and you have a general discussion, and then you break up into small groups, either one-on-one or two-on-two or whatever it is, and you review issues and talk about politics. You might talk about abortion. You might talk about the border. But the idea is, first of all, to get to know a person on the other side of the aisle and realize, first of all, they're a good person. They're not an ogre like you hear about. And then,
Are you sure? Are you sure they're not ogres, Mike?
yes,
Have you tested this? You've tested this for yourself at these meetings.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And then once you have a familiarization process, you dive into the issues. One person introduces one issue, and the other person introduces another. And the idea is to talk about what drives your opinion about that particular issue, and can you come to a consensus? And I've been at 7 or 8 of these, and consensus isn't very hard. Let's take something as controversial as abortion, because I think it's 68% of conservatives think some abortion should be allowed with limits. So even though the left would say no one on the right, everybody on the right wants it completely prohibited. But I had a discussion in one meeting with somebody who was radically, I would say very close to a communist. But we got to an abortion agreement in a reasonably short amount of time. Now, part of it is I call myself I'm a conservative genetically, but I'm a moderate politically, because I believe that you have to do things that will really work, and to stand on ideology and keep the country from moving forward is not a good idea. So those discussions go forward. The group is doing great and it's growing. The only problem is, and my standard joke when I talk about Braver Angels is, the people that need to be in it aren't the ones that are in it. The people that are in it.
Yeah, I need drug rehab, but I'm not going. I get it. No.
The people are in it are open to dialogue, and they're open to building consensus.
Yeah.
So
and it seems like if nothing else,
Ericka,
it's no, thank you. It seems like if nothing else, it's an opportunity to practice having these conversations in a safe environment.
Right. And there's a code of conduct. Don't raise your voice. Don't use any name calling. That you agree to abide by when you're part of the organization. And
they'd kick me out. They would kick me out right away. They would kick. Not the name calling. If I called someone dumb, is that name calling?
Yes.
Okay, I can't do that. I can't do that. Mike. So here's my question, which is, I hear what you're saying, and what it sounds like is that if this type of an organization, 40,000 is a big number, but you need 4 million, right? We're a country of 325 million, or 40 million. Until the let's call it the moderate center reclaims the political process and becomes the integral fulcrum of deciding elections, which I don't think they are anymore. Then both sides, I think, vie for, lack of a better term, control or supremacy, hegemony, whatever word you want to use with that. So I think in theory it's a great thing. I think you're right. The wrong people are going to those meetings because the people, it's sort of self-selection. If they're going to the meeting, they're open to compromise to begin with. The ones that are not open to compromise are not going to the meeting anyway. And I want to, however, segue, because your new book is coming out, America's Counterfeit Democracy. Integrate that in this kind of a conversation. What is America's counterfeit democracy, and how does it play into sort of this disappearing middle, if it does?
Okay. Well, we've spent the hour so far talking about tribalism. We've talked about what caused it and how to fix it and what it is and all that stuff. And I made the comment about, if we're tribal, we can't influence government action because we're fighting with each other. So when I started thinking about the 5th book, I thought about, well, do we really have control after all? And I decided, I did a lot of reading about it, and I read the history of theories of elite power and all that stuff. And I decided that we don't have control right now.
Control of what?
Control of the federal government is controlled by elites, is what the book is about. And the public has very little influence over government action. and there's data on that. For example, someone did a study where they looked at various issues, all the issues being introduced in front of Congress, and which ones were the elites interested in, and which ones were the public interested in, but the elites weren't. So if you look at that data, you find that issues the public only is interested in have about a 5% chance of becoming law. Whereas if the elites are interested in, no matter what the public thinks, they have a 79% chance of becoming law. So that's like a little factoid about what our influence really is. The elites, the term I use in my book, and it's not, I didn't invent this term, it was invented by somebody else, is the power elite. And the power elite are wealthy families who engage in politics, because they're wealthy families that don't engage in politics. They just ride around yachts. But the ones that do are in affiliation with large corporations. They either own them, or they have high stakes in them, or they serve on the boards of directors of those companies.
So you're talking about an oligarchy.
Yeah, basically. And maybe depending on how you define oligarchy, I mean, there's probably,
of course,
1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 power elites in the country. It's not 10. But there's
like
this
delegates.
There's this whole policy planning network that the power elites use to develop policies, which then they feed to the government to influence the government. So they have their own think tanks and research people that develop the policies that fit in with their objectives, and then those policies are fed to the government. The power elites also have significant role in the executive branch, because if you look at like the Treasury Department or Department of State, all the people on there are Ivy League educated. They've been consultants, they've been elected officials, they've been corporate leaders and all that. So they're in positions to directly influence government action that way. The elites
it's like
have
a pipeline basically through the education, whether like the Ivy League colleges and so forth.
Yep.
And if I recall correctly, there's a couple thousand super delegates in the Democratic Party that are going to help, for example, subvert democracy this year, if I may be so bold as to claim that.
Is that we have strayed from our moorings and our foundation, where the power is supposed to flow with the consent of the government from the bottom up. And Michael, we've argued here on this show that there really isn't as much distinction between left and right as there is top and bottom.
So uniparty.
Right.
Yes.
Got it. So when is your new book coming out?
Mid-September.
And where can they find what's your website? Where can they find you? And people who want to contact you?
MikeAndersonsbooks.com.